It's almost like a drug. People are like, yeah, I'm going to be Dr. So-and-so. And the big problem with that is that 50% of doctoral students end up not as PhD, not as EDD, but as ABD. And ABD is no BD.
You're listening to the Happy Doc Student Podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing clarity to the often mysterious doctoral process. Do you feel like you're losing your mind? Let me and my guests show you how to put more joy in your journey and graduate with your sanity, health, and relationships intact. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Frederick, and this is episode 21. On today's show, I'll be chatting with Chris Cappannelli about how to make a good decision regarding whether or not to pursue a doctoral degree. Chris is a federal special agent who received his EDD in Leadership and Management from St. Thomas University in 2018. He has a long and successful career with the government, holding diverse positions of increasing complexity and sensitivity, including the Department of Justice, the Department of Treasury, U.S. Customs, and Homeland Security investigations. To date, he has handled over 100 criminal cases, including narcotics enforcement, financial crimes, terrorism, and human rights and war crimes. Dr. Cappannelli has presented at numerous agency conferences and symposiums and has briefed agency executives at the highest levels. Presently, he serves as founder and principal of PGE Consulting, LLC, which is engaged in security consulting, education, investigations, analysis, and commentary to public, private, and media concerns. Particularly relevant for this show, he serves as a dissertation chair and committee member at both St. Thomas University and the College of Certified Psychophysiologists. Chris, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
I was so excited about today's podcast interview because lately I have had so many people asking me, how do I decide whether or not I should go for it and pursue a doctoral degree? And today we're going to talk about how this decision is not a small one. And hey, if you're listening and you're either already in your program or you have no intention of going back to school, what we're going to talk about today is relevant to any major life decision. So, Chris, I was reading an online interview where you were talking specifically about people going into law enforcement and some of the things that they should be thinking about. And so I just want to start with, here we are talking to an audience of people that may be sitting on the fence about a life decision. Where do you start?
Well, you start by examining what skill set you already have. I'll give you a couple of examples. Neil Armstrong, until after he walked on the moon, he didn't have anything more than a bachelor's degree, truth be told. But he was a naval aviator. He was a test pilot for Apollo 15. He flew Gemini. And he was the first man to walk on the moon. He was offered a teaching position at the University of Cincinnati. And believe it or not, there was actually some grief about whether or not him not having the master's degree qualified him at the university level to teach. And what ended up happening was he got his master's, I believe, from the University of Southern California. But Neil Armstrong doesn't need a doctorate. He never did and never will. Just his skill set alone qualified him. Similarly, when you talk about the private sector, for example, if you are a special agent with the IRS and you have, let's say, a master's degree in accounting, and you're a CPA, and you're a certified anti-money laundering specialist, and you have 20, 25 years of experience in the field, do you really need a doctorate of business administration to get a decent paying job in the private sector at a bank? Probably not. You've already substituted the coursework and the dissertation with real life experience. So chances are it would be almost counterproductive to spend that kind of time and money and effort in pursuing a doctoral degree at that point.
You know, I think a lot of people that I've spoken to see a doctorate, see these letters after their name as almost a silver bullet to reaching some higher level or dream job. And what you've just pointed out is hey, take a moment, decide where it is you want to be, and look at your skill set. It may be that the doctorate is not going to give you anything added.
That's absolutely correct. And yes, people are enamored with the postnominals. They're enamored with the degree. But like you say, it might not be value added at the end. And there are a lot of prices to pay that you and I, have discussed before, and I'm sure we'll discuss again today. A lot of people don't realize what it really costs, the investment to obtain a doctoral degree. And, I didn't learn that until I pursued one myself.
Chris, one of the reasons I was so excited about having you on the show for this particular episode is because you just tell it like it is. And I wanted someone who would come on and not kind of beat around the bush. Pursuing a doctorate is a huge decision. When you talk about investment, we're talking about way more than money.
Well, correct. You're talking about an investment in time. So, for example, I had a bachelor's degree until 2015, and I actually started my master's work in 2013. And that degree took me almost 2.5 years alone just to get to that level. You're going to have to take it in steps. And my steps were basically 5.5 years of time. So, time is a huge investment in this endeavor. Absolutely.
And in addition to time, what are some of the other things that you weren't really, maybe you weren't totally aware of when you took this step to pursue your doctorate in terms of how it impacted other aspects of your life?
Well, doctorates impact your life in a number of ways. They impact your life physically, they impact your life psychosocially, and also financially. So there are kind of like three big spheres in the Venn diagram, which intersect and kind of create the reality of what you will face in a doctoral program, much like a lot of professions. You have a personal life, you have a professional life. Within your personal life, you have your family, your health, your finances, and there's just a lot of things that you need to consider before you pursue this degree. 5.5 years is not a short period of time.
And I was just talking to someone yesterday who is going through some challenges with academics and balancing it with her professional life and her family life. And the statement that she made was something that I've heard, but it really hit home. And that is, you can only have one most important thing at any given time. And so while you're going through the doctorate, you're having to make decisions sometimes on a daily basis about what is and isn't going to give and where you're going to put your time.
Well, yes, generally speaking, if you are a doctoral student, you should expect to put in at least 25 hours a week above your quote unquote day job. So, for example, if you work at a bank and you put in 40, 45 hours a week, in the end, you're going to be working 70 hours a week with your studies. And your boss isn't necessarily going to be appreciative of the fact that you're pursuing a doctoral degree. If, for example, they have a big project coming up and they say to you, well, we need all hands on deck every night this week for the next 8 weeks. And you tell your boss, well, I've got papers and I've got research and I've got discussion questions. They're going to be, no, that doesn't fly. You either are here or you can look for another job. And I've experienced that in the law enforcement profession, surveillances, special projects, and things of that nature, especially during times of national emergency. They didn't want to hear that you weren't available. You need to be available. And like you said, only one thing will prevail. There's only so many hours in a week, so many hours in a day. What takes precedent?
And just like the employer may be expecting you to be available, your family, your partner, your kids may as well.
Absolutely. And I was involved in double jeopardy for the years that I was pursuing my degree. Not only did my job take me away a lot in terms of hours that I had to put into it. For example, in the federal service, you're required to put in 50 hours a week to justify the advanced overtime that they give you. So I was already 10 hours above and beyond the 40-hour week that most people would be expected to work. And now here I am at really 75 hours a week of either doing my day job or pursuing the degree. I can't tell you how many times I would tell my wife and my kids, you go on ahead. I'm sorry I can't make that movie tonight. We're going to have to hold off on seeing your family until a couple of weeks when the class ends, or, I'm not under so much pressure. Well, that kind of wears thin after a while, and it particularly wears thin after 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I cannot tell you how many of my colleagues I ended up seeing with fractured relationships with their wives, their children, friends, because they were just not available. Until you go through the journey, you really don't understand it.
Chris, you said so many important things. There's this issue of time that I think sometimes gets underplayed. And I think one of the reasons that is because you may start a program where your first few classes may not be as intensive as they later become. And so you kind of build up this, well, I can do it. And your partner or your spouse is maybe being a little more flexible because, oh, this is so exciting. You're pursuing your degree and your kids are maybe excited for you too and looking up to you, but it's a chronic situation. So now here we are 2 years in, 3 years in, and now the courses are getting more intense. And then you start your doctoral research and listen, I know some of you out there might be thinking, are they talking me out of doing this? And it's not that we want to talk anyone out of anything. What we want is for you to be an educated consumer of this degree. Just go in with your eyes wide open. You talked about fractured relationships. My marriage did dissolve during my doctoral research, and the divorce rate in the lab I was working in was about 70%. So this isn't a small thing. When we talk about you are not going to be available, it's something you really have to have a candid conversation with yourself, with your family, with your employer before you sign up thinking, this sounds great. I'm going to be Dr. So-and-so in a few years. Chris, when people are asking you, how do I decide to pursue or not to pursue? What are some of the steps you bring them through?
I asked them to look at 3 areas. I asked them to look at their physical state of being. I asked them to look at their psychosocial state of being, and I asked them to look at their financial state of being. And I'll explain. One of the things I think that people should do before they pursue a doctoral degree is get a complete physical.
I love that.
That you want to discover is that you have an untreated heart condition, untreated high blood pressure, and untreated metabolic disorder. I almost died in February of last year from systemic organ failure from untreated high blood pressure simply because I had not seen a doctor in over 3 years. I was so involved in the program, so involved in the work. It just got away from me. It wasn't important. I was running on adrenaline. I was running on overdrive. And I neglected my body. I neglected myself. And another part of neglect is your eating habits change. It becomes easier to grab McDonald's or a pizza or Chinese food than it does to take the energy to cook because you don't have the time to cook. You don't have the time to clean. What about exercise? Are you taking at least 30 minutes in the morning before the day really kicks in to walk around your neighborhood, go to the gym, get on the treadmill or an elliptical? Before you know it, I mean, for myself, I gained an ungodly amount of weight because all you do is sit. I mean, if you're sitting at your day job and you're sitting at home, that's really half the week you're spending sitting, never mind the time that you're in bed. Your body's not moving, and that's a bad thing. With respect to psychosocial issues, again, we talked about family, we talked about friends, we talked about your employer. You better get the support of your family on board. Even though I did not end up divorcing, my relationship with my wife and my children did suffer. And in some respects, we're still repairing the damage from that today. I'll never forget the first time I went on vacation after my doctorate was completed. And it was just a release. I didn't realize the amount of pressure that I had been living under for the previous 5.5 years, and the impact that that had on my family. I think I did apologize to them for putting them through what they went through, standing on the sidelines, watching me isolate myself in my office for that period of time, because when I came home from work, I effectively went into my office spending 3, 4 hours a night, plus at least one day on the weekend. And with respect to financial issues, people have to realize that at a minimum, a doctorate's probably going to cost you $50,000. And nobody has $50,000 usually sitting around gathering dust. You're probably going to have to take out loans for that. And then you talk about some of the better colleges and universities, you're talking upwards of $100, $125, $150,000. Are you going to be able to recoup that money? Right now, we're on a moratorium for student loans. There's no guarantee that moratorium is going to last forever. And the bill always comes due. And there's significant pushback from taxpayers right now saying, hey, you took out the loan, you paid for it. Yeah. It's your degree, you earned it. That's not on me, that's on you. So that's the triumvirate of what people need to look at when they consider whether or not to pursue a doctoral degree.
And Chris, I love that you started with the physical, because I would venture to guess there's not one program out there recruiting students who asks, hey, do you think you're physically ready for this adventure that we want you to come on with us? And getting a physical, making sure that you already have a routine in place. In fact, as you were talking, I was thinking a great thing for someone to do would be look at your calendar, find 20 to 25, maybe even 30 hours a week, and do a trial run, maybe 2 weeks. Spend that time actually investigating different schools, different programs, reaching out to people to ask them, was the degree worth it for them? And see what impact that has on your daily life with your employer, with your family, before you even sign up. Actually sit in a chair for 25 hours a week researching programs so that you can see, would you want to do this for 4, 5, 6, 7 years? And get that physical.
Well, it's funny. It's kind of like the old adage, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. I have banged my head into walls, telling people, talk to me, come see me, I'll meet you at a coffee shop. We'll sit, we'll talk. You can pick my brain no matter how much you want about my experience. And people are laser focused on that honorific doctor and those postnominals, PhD, EDD, DBA. It's almost like a drug. People get blinded by it. People are like, yeah, I'm going to be Dr. So-and-so. And the big problem with that is that 50% of doctoral students end up not as PhD, not as EDD, but as ABD. And ABD is no BD. You can't put those postnominals after your name. It doesn't matter what coursework you did. It doesn't matter that you started your dissertation. Until you finish and you defend, your last degree is what your degree is, period. And I cannot tell you, I have experienced, even amongst friends of mine who did not complete their doctorate, the jealousy, the envy, their own anger at not having completed the program. And sometimes it's not even their fault. The money runs out, their chair has died, and the work ends up dying on the vine. They got sick. They ended up getting diabetes or cancer or had a heart attack or a stroke, and they couldn't complete the program. And if they took out loans, doesn't matter. You're on the hook for those loans no matter what. So there are a lot of frustrated people out there who went into doctoral programs saying, I'm going to be Dr. So-and-so, and they end up being Dr. No. And it's sad, but that's reality.
It is reality. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term ABD, it stands for all but dissertation. You've finished all your coursework, and then it comes down to your doctoral research. And it is the part of the program where researchers who study this see the highest dropout rate. Overall, it is about 50%. We talk about that number a lot. And Chris, like you said, you may have the best intentions. You may be completely capable of finishing the degree, but there are so many uncontrollable factors that can come in, from where you're getting your participants to a school closing to getting sick, having a baby, needing to care for a family member. And when you have to take a break, sometimes the time runs out. People don't realize there's actually a clock ticking and you have to finish in a certain amount of time. And this loops back into that third pillar that you were talking about regarding finances. I will ask people, how much money are you willing to go into debt knowing you may not have the degree? So if you're saying, I'm okay going $60,000 in debt and not being able to call myself doctor, then you've checked that box. But it is a question I think people should ask themselves. And even if you're being offered a training grant or a teaching assistantship, the degree costs money in terms of taking time away from work or other things that you may need to pay for out of pocket, like editors, statistical consultants, tutors, travel to residencies, things of that nature. It can really add up. So the finances is something people really need to look at with their eyes wide open.
Absolutely. I hesitate to say this, but part of obtaining a doctoral degree is resilience and character. I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with the Hell Week that Navy SEALs go through when they are in BUDS training. And BUDS is Basic Underwater Demolition School. Hell Week is something that everybody who has ever worn the Naval Trident has to go through. And it is a solid week of 10-mile runs, 6-mile swims, firearms training on maybe all of 5, 7, 10 hours of sleep throughout an entire week until they tell you that they're secure and that Hell Week is over. I had a cohort member of mine. She went through literally kind of her own Hell Week over the course of our doctoral program. She got divorced, had a baby, and her father died. And she never missed a beat throughout the entire thing. I was abjectly amazed that she made it. Some people, they had one little hiccup. I don't know, they caught the flu and that was it. That was the end of their program. They couldn't handle bouncing back. They couldn't bounce back. And that is a defining characteristic of whether or not you're going to be able to complete the doctorate. Are you going to be able to be resilient? I'll tell you a story. And I think every doctoral student goes through this. And Heather, you might have gone through it too. When I completed chapter 1 of my dissertation and it went to my committee, my chair and one of my committee members liked my chapter 1 very much. The other one was a real curmudgeon, for lack of a better term, and I'll bite my tongue here as to what I really thought of him at the time. He basically tore up my chapter 1. He basically said, this doesn't pass it. This doesn't cut mustard. You're going to have to rewrite this. And I was absolutely frazzled, absolutely knocked off balance. I said, I spent the last 2 months writing this. And how could it not be good, considering that I had been writing throughout the entire program? You're going to have to learn to take the lumps as a doctoral student, and you're going to have to put up with the quirks and the idiosyncrasies of your chair and your committee members and of the process. And if you think you're going to fight back and fight the process, people have been earning doctorates for over 150 years. You are not going to change it. So you either better get with the program, or again, it might not be for you.
And this idea of, or the reality of, needing to please 3 different academics, and then often a dean or an outside reader, is something that we're not used to. We usually work with one professor, one instructor. We kind of get into a flow. We know what they're looking for. We pass on to the next class. And now suddenly you're here needing to please multiple masters. And we all know how difficult that is in any arena of life. And you bring up this concept of resilience. And so I would love to go back to that second pillar, psychosocial, where your family and your friends are involved, and maybe having a candid conversation saying, hey, can we talk about how you view my resiliency? Am I one of the bouncy balls, or am I one to kind of say, maybe not? Because again, you will have sacrificed a lot sometimes before you hit that first big barrier. And now here you are, $30,000, $40,000 in debt. It would have been way, way better, guys, to just take a couple weeks before you decide you're going to go into this program and have these conversations with people who know you, who love you. If I have to miss weddings, if I have to miss birthdays, if I have to miss anniversaries, if we don't take vacations, and this is something that goes on for a couple of years, how willing are you to be part of this journey with me?
Well, I hope you keep this in the final edits, but I owe my wife, Marietta, a big apology. And I owe my children, Andrew and Gregory, a big apology. My wife was not a fan of me pursuing this doctorate. She said, Chris, you're a federal law enforcement officer working 50 hours a week. You're already coming off a master's program that was very demanding. You know, I'm not sure it's going to work. But again, had that tunnel vision, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And I learned some very, very, very difficult and bitter lessons as a result of that. And I almost lost what's truly important. And I think one of the conversations that needs to be had, not so much with the family, even if you have the support, is much like a doctor discussing a terminal illness with a patient. There might come a time when you're going to have to, even if you're a year and a half into the program, am I paying too much for this? And is it time to put this thing to rest? Much like the beloved pet that we have to euthanize. And I had to do that in December of last year. And my wife and I kept looking at each other. Is it time? Is it time? The kidneys are failing. She's not looking good. It's part of your dream. It might be part of what you feel defines you, but you might end up imploding before you even reach the end of that journey. Is life more important to you? Is your sanity more important to you? Is your family more important to you? Or is putting a piece of paper on a wall and having those initials after your name important to you? And I know it's kind of disingenuous because I'm there. And you're there, Heather.
Right.
So it's almost like we made it to the other side, and we can look back now and almost laugh at it. It's not so easy when you're the one sulking around because you spent 2.5 years of your life doing this, and you're tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and you have nothing to show for it. So I get that.
Yeah, Chris, I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking there's probably people out there going, well, easy for you two to say, you get to go around calling yourselves doctor, but a couple of things I wanted to comment on. A couple of weeks ago, I released a podcast with Dr. Otto. She has a book called The Good Goodbye. And it was a podcast specifically for people who have decided they want to leave their program. And how do you work through these emotions of letting this dream go? Not unlike letting your dog go. And people were commenting, hey, I made decisions in the middle of my program or even towards the end of my program to stop, and it was the best decision ever for me. So I just want to encourage people out there. Yes, Chris and I are sitting here as doctors, but when people ask me if it was worth it, I have to make it worth it because of what I sacrificed. Would I be doing something as equally enjoyable, is equally in line with what I believe my life purpose is if I didn't have a doctorate? I think I would be because that's my nature. So again, I think the bigger questions here for you to ask if you're thinking about this is, where do I want to be? And do I need this degree to get there? If you want to lead a joyful life full of grace and ease where you're living your purpose and contributing to society, ask yourself, do I really need this degree? Maybe the answer is yes, in which case, full speed ahead, right? Right, Chris?
Yes, full speed ahead. And again, what is it that you need and what is the value added? I was facing something entirely different. I'm not management. I don't have a heck of a lot of experience in a specialized area. So for me, the degree was a natural choice because I needed to increase my skill set that I didn't already have. See, that's the difference. The difference is that I actually built up my skill set. And I want to tell people also too, not to be disillusioned with what they think they're going to do with the degree afterwards. I had a lot of people tell me, oh yeah, I'm going to be a professor and I'm going to be a college administrator and I'm going to be the president and chancellor of a university. I was like, good luck. Right now, in the era of COVID and post-COVID, colleges and universities are severely trimming back staff and budget. You're lucky to be able to get a job as an adjunct, much less a full professorship or a college administrator. And I tell people pursuing the degree, if you're going to get the degree, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I teach, I consult, I speak publicly. Academics is just one part of what I do. And if you think that the EDD or PhD is going to be the be all to end all because you're going to become some great researcher and whatever it is, I know somebody who has a PhD in biology. He's working at Walmart. Cannot get a job as a researcher anywhere.
Yeah, it really doesn't guarantee you anything.
No, it does not.
So, Chris, before we wrap up, we were talking before we started recording that you're a big fan of SWOT analysis for any life decision. And I would love to leave the listeners with you walking them through how they go about doing that.
Well, for those of you who don't have a management background, SWOT, SWOT, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's a box. And basically you create a 4-square box and you start writing down, well, what are my best qualities? What makes me the best at who I am or what I am? That's one. You look at your weaknesses. Okay. Are you lazy? Are you emotional, overly emotional? I mean, we all have emotions, but are you overly emotional? Do you cry at the drop of a pin? And then you have to take those attributes and compare them at opportunities versus threats. So in my case, the doctorate opened up opportunities because I did not have an existing skill set. But if your strength is that you have the existing skill set, that opportunity box might not be so full. In fact, the threat box might end up being more full because, again, it's the threats to family, the threats to your job, the threat to your finances, the threats to your health. Effectively, it's a cost-benefit analysis in the end. And you really need to sit down and you need to draw out that box and you need to write everything. It could be a big piece of paperboard that your kids do projects on for school, and draw it out and write in it and take a look at it and really examine every element that you wrote in every one of those boxes. And if you do that, I believe you'll come to the right decision. It might not be the decision you thought you'd come to, much like research. You go where the evidence takes you. You'd be surprised how many researchers start research and they don't end up with the results that they thought that they would get. They have the null and the alternative hypothesis. Well, you might end up with the alternative here. And you might turn around and say, nah, not going to fly. So,
and you know what, Chris, I think that exercise would be so beneficial, not just for people sitting on the fence about the doctoral program or any big life decision, but even people who are in the middle of their program right now to maybe get out a big piece of paper. I'm picturing those big poster boards, like you said, and take time. Just don't do this in 10 minutes. Take days. Involve people who know you and love you and are going to be candid and honest with you. And maybe check in every year while you're in your doctoral program and confirm this is still working for you.
Absolutely. And again, I think colleges and universities do a very poor job of counseling. I never once spoke to a counselor in the 5.5 years I was in a graduate program, period. Nobody's checking in with you. Nobody's checking your mental health. Nobody's checking your physical health. As long as that financial aid keeps coming in, and I'm sure my college and university isn't going to be happy with me saying that, but it's true. They think, hey, you're an adult. You know what you signed up for? Here you go. Colleges and universities need to do a better job of checking in, even for an hour or 2 hours, once a year, or maybe even 6 months. Hey, how you doing? Are you okay? How's your family? How's your job? Things of that nature. And stuff like that would probably be very beneficial and help people take the pulse at various points in their journey. And hopefully they might not get too far in before they realize it's not for them.
I absolutely love that you brought that up, because on many of my podcasts, I'm kind of, hey, shout out to any administrators out there. We understand that education is a business. We get it. But how amazing would it be if you were the institution that said, we want to help you make a good decision. Let us help you decide whether or not this program is good for you. Then once you get in, let us take the pulse along the way so that either you finish and you finish with your sanity and your health intact, or you don't finish and you're okay with that decision, and so are we.
I was the chair for a doctoral student, and he was an older gentleman, retired, but he was also a foster dad. He did not have the space, he did not have the time, he did not have the energy. And unfortunately, I lost him not even 3 months into the program. Had I been able to speak to him, I probably would have told him, hey, this is not a good idea. And that's unfortunate, but again, that's reality.
And what I'm hoping everyone's gaining from this episode is that this is a big decision, and the information being provided to you today is really to allow you to go in with your eyes wide open so that you make the best decision for you.
I hope that people have taken the opportunity to take what I've said to heart. Again, not trying to be overly harsh here, but I am trying to be realistic. You got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest with others. If you're just going to be laser focused on that honorific or those postnominals, you're going to miss the bigger picture, and you might end up in a deeper hole than you should have from the beginning.
Chris, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insights, and in particular, just being so candid and open and honest with us today. It was really a pleasure.
It was a pleasure being here with you too, Heather. Thank you.
So whether you're sitting on the fence trying to decide whether or not you should pursue a doctoral degree, or you're in your program and struggling with whether or not you should continue, I hope that this episode gave you some insights. And if you're looking for more information, I invite you to download a short article I wrote called The Doctoral Journey: 12 Things You Need to Know That They Probably Won't Tell You. This is available as a free download on my website, expandyourhappy.com. I'll be sure to pop the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Oh, hey, one more thing. I do need to remind you that the information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only.